Friday night from 6 to probably 9, maybe longer. Halloween night, we'll have a closing reception for my show. ArtSpace is located on Main Street. It's 1219 Main Street in Buffalo. And we'll have a nice little reception there. And you can see some of the works in person and say hello. Now, these are figure drawings. They're nudes, so in that sense they're traditional, but there's a improvisational aspect to how I make these. And I always draw from life. I don't care to use photographs. I never use them. So in a weird way, it's kind of similar to the way I make the music, because the music is all done live. I don't do any post-production like edits or things usually. The drawings are kind of like that too. And so sometimes, like this, they'll end up reproduced for a record jacket. This is one of the records that came out on Prologue a couple of years ago. You get the visual and the audio. So I kind of like that. These are kind of the preliminary drawings that I make before I start a long session, and I do them very quickly, like 30 seconds or something, maybe a minute. And so sometimes they look like humans, sometimes they just look like weird squiggly lines. But I like these because I can reproduce them as screen prints later. And I'll scan them in the computer, and then I'll transfer them to a screen, like this one here. So when I screen print these on the record jackets, I screen every one by hand. So let's say I do 500. It can be quite a project, but I like it. So I'm going to keep doing it. In DJ culture, a lot of records will look like this. It's a plain jacket, and there's not much to the presentation. And this is understandable because it's expensive to make full artwork jackets. With my work, I wanted to do something bold that, the DJs would see it if it were displayed in the shop. And again, I'm able to do this on my own. So with these jackets, they're basically just plain jackets that I directly screen print on. And again, I like to at least make some attempt to give the physical release a kind of artistic feel, almost like a limited edition print, because each one of these is printed by hand. That's just the way I like to do it. And the records are often in limited editions, so it's feasible for me to print them all myself. So for DJs, you could think of a label as the publishing house of an artist. And in my case, I started the label in 1997 because I wanted to have creative freedom to do exactly what I wanted to release and not be subject to another label's deadlines. So I began releasing them on my own. And a label as your publishing house, so to speak, sort of defines your aesthetic. So DJs will often have an affinity for a certain label, and maybe they'll collect, you know, most or all of the releases on a certain label. And I think that idea doesn't really come across so much in a lot of mainstream music that's disseminated on iTunes, for example. I think people, they probably don't identify the music so much with a label. But I like to think of it that way for what I do. When you look at my back catalog, I think you'll see a sort of persistent kind of vision. At least I hope you'll see that, or hear that. It's minimal enough to be blended with something else, but not so minimal that it's completely boring by itself. That's the goal. You're trying to get as much as you can out of only a few sounds. That's what it is to me. Like you're trying to get each sound that you use to say a lot, as opposed to just adding more things. This is the idea. Sometimes it works quite well, and other times, you know, I might look back on it later and think that, you know, maybe it was too minimal. You know, I keep going thinking that, you know, the best track that I've ever made has not been written yet, and that I have to work harder to make that happen. Almost everything in there does not have patch memory capability. So every time you change a setting on the synthesizer, the sound has been changed, and you'll never quite get it back to where it was before. It's not like you can just dial in a preset sound. Every time I approach it, I have to build a brand new sound every time. And for me, as an artist, that's very important, because it's really almost the same as when I'm drawing. It's completely spontaneous. It has to be done from scratch every time. And it kind of forces me to search for a new sound. There's a moment when you're working in this way, recording live, making new patches from scratch, making new sounds. There's a moment where you hit that perfect sweet spot where you find that sound that you're looking for, and you realize that it's happening. Moment usually happens when you're alone. Now, if you're lucky, you can share that sound later with people, but it's never quite the same as when you first discovered it in the studio, alone. But if you're lucky, you can share it later. Now you know why I don't go out anymore. You know, got it all right here.